Have you ever felt a shiver down your spine? A prickle of unease that tells you something profound, something life-altering, is about to happen? Not a grand, obvious turning point, but a subtle shift in the air. A whisper of destiny unfurling its tangled threads right before your unsuspecting eyes? Imagine a life, meticulously built brick by painstaking brick, a facade of normalcy and quiet contentment, suddenly, violently, ripped open by a past that refuses to stay buried. This isn't just a story. It's a chilling echo from the depths of human decision, a testament to how the choices we make, no matter how distant or deeply buried, possess an almost supernatural ability to claw their way back, demanding and reckoning. Our story begins not in a grand ballroom or a crumbling mansion shrouded in mystery, but in the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of a bustling corporate office in the heart of Atlanta. Sarah Jenkins, a woman whose life seemed to embody quiet resilience, was a creature of habit and meticulous order. Her desk, adorned with a single unassuming succulent, was always impeccably organized, a reflection of her inner world, or at least, the world she meticulously curated for public consumption. At 52, Sarah carried herself with an understated elegance, her silver-streaked auburn hair always neatly pinned back, her sensible but stylish clothes speaking volumes of a woman who valued practicality yet didn't shy away from subtle grace. She had spent the last 2 decades climbing the corporate ladder at Ethel Solutions, a leading tech firm, and had just secured a coveted promotion to senior project manager. It was a role she had worked tirelessly for, a testament to her unwavering dedication and sharp intellect. This promotion, she believed, was the final piece in her carefully constructed mosaic of a stable, secure future. A future where the ghosts of her past, she hoped, were finally laid to rest. But fate, it seems, has a crueler sense of irony than any human playwright could conjure. Sarah had just celebrated her promotion with a small, intimate dinner with her husband, Mark, a man whose gentle humor and steady presence had been her anchor through decades of quiet struggles. They had clinked glasses, the crystal chiming softly, a sound that in retrospect would seem almost tragically naive. The very next morning, a company-wide email landed in her inbox, an announcement that rippled through the office like a sudden, unexpected tremor. The new regional director, overseeing Sarah's entire department, was to be introduced at a mandatory all-hands meeting that afternoon. A new director was not unusual, of course, in a company as dynamic as Ethel. What was unusual, however, was the palpable buzz, the hushed whispers of anticipation and trepidation that preceded this particular arrival. Rumors had been swirling for weeks about a young, brilliant, and ruthlessly ambitious prodigy, plucked from a rival firm, who was set to shake things up. Sarah, ever pragmatic, simply hoped for a competent, fair leader. She had no idea that the shake-up would be a cataclysmic earthquake in the very foundations of her meticulously built existence. The meeting room, usually a drab space for weekly updates, was abuzz with nervous energy. Colleagues whispered theories, speculated on the new director's personality, and exchanged wary glances. Sarah, ever composed, sat towards the back, observing the scene with a detached curiosity. She felt a vague sense of excitement, a challenge to look forward to. Little did she know, the challenge would come not from new projects or complex deadlines, but from the very deepest, most guarded corner of her soul. As the CEO, Mr. Harrison, strode to the podium, a hush fell over the room. He spoke with his usual booming enthusiasm, praising the company's growth, its innovative spirit, and then, with a flourish, introduced the new addition. "It is my distinct honor," Mr. Harrison announced, his voice reverberating through the room, "to welcome Mr. Elias Thorne, our new regional director, who brings with him an unparalleled vision and a track record of transformative leadership." And then he walked in. The air in the room seemed to thicken, almost visibly. Sarah felt a peculiar jolt, a physical sensation that was both disorienting and deeply unsettling. Elias Thorne. The name itself felt like a hammer blow against the fragile piece she had constructed. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a sharp, dark suit that accentuated his athletic build. His dark hair was styled meticulously, and his eyes, a piercing shade of hazel, seemed to survey the room with an unnerving intensity. He was undeniably handsome, exuding an aura of quiet power and formidable intelligence. But it wasn't his appearance that struck Sarah with such visceral force. It was something else, something far more profound, something that resonated with a forgotten ache deep within her. As he walked past her row, his gaze, for a fleeting, agonizing second, met hers. And in that instant, Sarah's world tilted on its axis. A rush of memories, sharp and painful, flooded her mind, threatening to overwhelm her carefully constructed composure. The scent of antiseptic, the sterile white walls of a hospital room, the distant cries of newborns, and the overwhelming, crushing weight of a decision she had made more than 3 decades ago. His eyes, those eyes, they were eerily, impossibly familiar. A flicker of recognition, a primal, undeniable connection, shot through her. It was as if time had folded in on itself, collapsing the vast expanse of 32 years into a single terrifying moment. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and dawning realization. Her breath hitched in her throat, and she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Couldn't be. Simply couldn't be. The thought was absurd, a product of an overactive imagination fueled by stress and anxiety. Yet, the certainty that gripped her was icy cold, undeniable. Elias Thorne continued to the front of the room, completely oblivious to the silent storm he had unleashed within Sarah. He exuded confidence, his voice calm and authoritative as he addressed his new team. But Sarah heard none of it. Her ears were ringing, her vision blurred, and the familiar office setting seemed to dissolve around her, replaced by fragmented, haunting images from a past she had tried so desperately to bury. A young woman, barely out of her teens, her body ravaged by an unimaginable decision, tears streaming down her face as she signed the papers. A tiny bundle, wrapped in a soft white blanket, disappearing into the arms of strangers. The profound, echoing silence that followed, a silence that had never truly left her. For over 3 decades, Sarah had lived with a secret, a profound, agonizing choice she had made when she was just 20 years old. A choice born of desperation, fear, and a naive belief that she was doing what was best for everyone involved. She had been a bright, ambitious college student, with dreams as vast and boundless as the sky. Then, an unexpected, unwanted pregnancy had threatened to derail everything. In a time when options were limited and societal judgment was harsh, she had made the heart-wrenching decision to give her baby up for adoption. It was a closed adoption, meaning there would be no contact, no knowledge of the child's future, no chance of reunion. Or so she had believed. She had convinced herself it was the only way, that a loving family would provide a better life than she, a struggling student, ever could. She had buried the pain deep, deep within her, a silent scar on her soul, and built a new life, a respectable life, a life where that painful chapter was meticulously erased. She had married Mark a few years later, and together they had built a life filled with quiet joys and shared dreams. They had wanted children, desperately, but fate had been cruel, and after years of trying, they had come to terms with the fact that they wouldn't have biological children of their own. The adoption of a beautiful little girl named Lily, now a vibrant, independent 15-year-old, had brought immense joy and purpose to their lives. Sarah had believed, truly believed, that she had made peace with her past, that the chapter of her firstborn was closed forever. She had learned to live with the quiet ache, the occasional pang of wonder about the child she had never known, the life she had given away. But she had never, not once, imagined that the child would walk back into her life, not as a long-lost stranger seeking answers, but as her superior, a man of power and authority, standing right before her, unaware of the seismic shift he had just triggered within her. The meeting droned on, a muffled cacophony of corporate jargon and strategic goals, but Sarah heard none of it. Her mind was a dizzying kaleidoscope of past and present, a frantic struggle to reconcile the suave, formidable man at the podium with the tiny, innocent face she had held for mere moments, so many years ago. Every fiber of her being screamed in protest. It was impossible. a cruel trick of fate. Yet, the resemblance, subtle yet undeniably there, the peculiar way he held his head, the curve of his smile, the intensity in his eyes, it was too much to dismiss as mere coincidence. The same hazel eyes, perhaps a shade darker now, but with an unmistakable glint she remembered. A glint that had haunted her dreams for decades. She felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. What would she do? How could she possibly navigate this impossible situation? Her heart pounded, a frantic rhythm that echoed the rising tide of panic within her. The carefully constructed walls of her life were crumbling, brick by painful brick. The secret she had guarded so fiercely, the wound she thought had healed, was now bleeding profusely, exposed and raw. And the man who was unwittingly tearing her world apart was now her boss. The irony was too brutal, too perfectly cruel to be anything but a nightmare. She needed air. She needed to escape. But her feet felt rooted to the floor, her body trembling, trapped in the inescapable grip of a past that had just announced its terrifying, undeniable return. This was not just a new chapter in her career. It was the reopening of a book she had desperately tried to close, a book filled with pain, regret, and a secret that had now, quite literally, walked into her office. The question wasn't if her past would be revealed, but when, and with what devastating consequences. The air in the meeting room, once thick with anticipation, now felt suffocating to Sarah. Every word Elias Thorne uttered, every confident gesture he made, seemed to amplify the clamor of her inner turmoil. She stared at him, not with the typical employee's appraisal of a new boss, but with the raw, desperate scrutiny of a mother grappling with an unthinkable recognition. His voice, deep and resonant, was laced with an understated authority. He spoke of innovation, market share, and employee empowerment, all the buzzwords of the corporate world. But for Sarah, each syllable was a torturous reminder of the life she had surrendered, and the man who stood before her, unaware of the profound, invisible umbilical cord that still connected them. Her mind raced, frantically sifting through fragments of memory, trying to find concrete proof, anything to dislodge this horrifying certainty. Had his adoption agency shared any details about his birth parents? No, she had been assured of complete anonymity. Had she ever seen his picture before? Never. This was a man she had never known, never seen, never been allowed to glimpse. Yet, the feeling persisted, a visceral, unshakable truth that resonated in her very bones. It was in the subtle curve of his nose, so similar to her own father's, a feature she knew she had passed on. It was in the way his eyebrows arched when he made a point, a familiar intensity that mirrored her own when she was deeply focused. And those eyes, those piercing hazel eyes, deep-set and intelligent, held a spark, a distant echo of the baby she had held for a precious, fleeting moment. She found herself analyzing his every move, every subtle nuance. When he gestured with his hands, she noticed the elegant length of his fingers, so like hers. When he smiled, a brief, professional curve of his lips, a peculiar dimple appeared on his left cheek, a dimple she distinctly remembered seeing on her newborn's impossibly soft skin. The details, small and seemingly insignificant to anyone else, formed an undeniable mosaic of recognition for Sarah. It was like fitting together pieces of a puzzle she never knew existed, a puzzle whose completion brought not clarity, but an overwhelming wave of dread. How could she work for him? How could she sit in meetings, take direction, and pretend that her entire world hadn't just been irrevocably shattered? The thought of daily interactions, of maintaining a professional facade while her heart screamed with 1,000 unasked questions, was unbearable. She imagined the casual conversations, the polite nods, the professional smiles, all while knowing the monstrous secret that lay beneath. It felt like living in a constant state of performance, a high-stakes play where one wrong move could expose everything. The meeting finally concluded, and a flurry of introductions and networking began. Sarah, usually a confident networker, felt herself shrinking, becoming almost invisible. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, on her notes, anywhere but on Elias Thorne. She felt his presence, a powerful gravitational pull in the room. Even when her back was to him, she could feel his movements, his voice as he greeted colleagues, the subtle shift in the room's energy as he commanded attention. It was a suffocating sensation, like being trapped in a small room with a roaring fire she couldn't extinguish. As the room began to clear, Sarah slowly gathered her things, her hands trembling imperceptibly. She desperately needed to escape, to find a quiet corner where she could breathe, where she could process this devastating revelation. But just as she reached the door, she heard his voice, clear and resonant, right behind her. "Ms. Jenkins." Her blood ran cold. She froze, her hands still on the doorknob, every muscle in her body tensing. For a split second, she considered pretending she hadn't heard him, but it was too late. Slowly, she turned, forcing a polite, if somewhat strained, smile to her lips. Her eyes, still wide with a mix of terror and fascination, met his directly. "Yes, Mr. Thorne?" she managed, her voice a little breathy, betraying the tremor in her hands. Elias Thorne smiled, a polite, professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I just wanted to introduce myself properly. Elias Thorne. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard great things about your work here." He extended a hand. Sarah's heart pounded. This was it. The moment of physical contact, the ultimate test of her composure. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to maintain eye contact, and extended her own hand. Her fingers brushed his, and a jolt, an undeniable spark, shot through her. It was as if every nerve ending in her body suddenly ignited. His grip was firm, confident. Her hand, in contrast, felt cold and clammy. She pulled back almost immediately, hoping her haste wasn't too obvious. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I'm Sarah Jenkins. And it's a pleasure to meet you too." The words felt hollow, a desperate lie. Elias, oblivious, nodded. "I'm looking forward to working with you, Ms. Jenkins. I hear you're the go-to person for everything related to the Phoenix Project." "That's correct," Sarah replied, trying to sound as normal as possible. "I've been leading it for the past 2 years." "Excellent," he said, his eyes scanning her face, though without any hint of deeper recognition. He was merely assessing a new employee. "I'll be setting up individual meetings with all my direct reports over the next few days. Please keep an eye out for an email from my assistant for scheduling." "Of course," Sarah responded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Well then, I'll see you around, Ms. Jenkins." He offered another brief, professional smile and then turned, striding confidently out of the room. Sarah stood there for a long moment, frozen, her hand still tingling from his touch. The room was now empty, the silence deafening, punctuated only by the frantic beat of her own heart. She felt like she had just survived an impossible ordeal, a high-wire act where one misstep would have sent her plummeting into the abyss. But the ordeal wasn't over. It had just begun. The casual handshake, the polite exchange of pleasantries, had only solidified her terrifying conviction. This was him, the boy she had given up, now a man, a powerful man, and her boss. She finally managed to drag herself out of the meeting room, her legs feeling like lead. She found solace in the quiet hum of her office, the familiar scent of paper and stale coffee providing a small measure of comfort. She sank into her chair, her mind reeling, trying to piece together a strategy, any strategy, to navigate this unfathomable situation. Should she tell him? The thought was ludicrous. How would that conversation even begin? "By the way, Mr. Thorne, I gave birth to you 32 years ago, and then I gave you away?" The mere idea sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. It would shatter his world, her world, and undoubtedly destroy her career, if not her entire life. He would hate her. He would resent her. And who could blame him? No, she couldn't tell him. Not yet. Maybe never. She had to act normal. She had to pretend. She had to bury the secret even deeper, protect it with every fiber of her being. But how? How could she look at him every day, knowing the truth, knowing the unasked questions that hung in the air between them, questions that only she could answer? The irony was crushing. For years she had occasionally wondered about him, where he was, what he was doing, if he was happy. She had pictured him as a successful man, surrounded by love, leading a fulfilling life. But never, not in her wildest, most terrifying nightmares, had she envisioned him walking into her professional life, holding power over her, completely unaware of their shared, tragic history. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor, pulling the strings of fate in the most agonizing ways imaginable. Sarah knew, with a chilling certainty, that her carefully constructed life was on the precipice of collapse. The professional challenges she had embraced now paled in comparison to the personal maelstrom that threatened to engulf her. Every day she would have to face him, work with him, perhaps even report directly to him, all while carrying this monumental, agonizing secret. The weight of it felt unbearable, a heavy cloak that threatened to suffocate her. The past was not just a memory. It was a living, breathing entity, personified in the man who now sat in the corner office, the man whose very existence was a testament to her deepest regret and most profound sacrifice. And as the clock ticked, Sarah knew the unspoken confrontation, the inevitable collision of past and present, was not a matter of if, but when. The unseen threads of destiny had just tightened their grip, pulling her into a narrative far more dramatic and heart-wrenching than any she could have ever imagined. The days that followed Elias Thorne's arrival at Ethel Solutions were an agonizing blur for Sarah. Each morning, the familiar dread would settle in her stomach, a cold knot of anxiety that tightened with every step she took towards the office. The casual glances in the hallway, the brief, polite exchanges in the break room, the seemingly innocuous emails from his assistants scheduling meetings, every interaction, no matter how trivial, felt like a high-stakes encounter, a delicate dance around a ticking time bomb. Sarah found herself observing Elias with an almost obsessive intensity. She studied his mannerisms, his reactions, trying to find anything that might betray a hint of recognition, a flicker of understanding in his piercing hazel eyes. But there was nothing. He was all professionalism, all business. He was sharp, decisive, and clearly highly intelligent, quickly grasping the intricacies of the company's operations. He held strategy meetings where he expertly dissected complex problems, his questions incisive, his insights often brilliant. Sarah, in her professional capacity, found herself respecting his intellect and leadership, a cruel irony that only added to her torment. How could she admire the man who was unwittingly tearing her life apart? The individual meetings he held with his direct reports were particularly excruciating. Sarah's turn came a week after his arrival. She walked into his spacious corner office, the one that once belonged to her former, more benevolent director, feeling a profound sense of claustrophobia. The room, with its panoramic views of the Atlanta skyline, seemed to shrink around her. Elias sat behind his large, polished mahogany desk, framed by tall windows, looking every inch the powerful executive. He gestured for her to sit in one of the plush leather chairs opposite him. "Thank you for coming in, Sarah," he began, using her first name, a casual familiarity that sent a jolt through her. She had been Ms. Jenkins for the previous interactions. "I've been looking over your file, and your work on the Phoenix project is truly impressive. The data speaks for itself." Sarah forced a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I appreciate that." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady and direct. "I believe in empowering my team, and I see immense potential in you. I want to discuss how we can leverage your experience to take Phoenix to the next level, perhaps even expand its scope." He began outlining his vision, his voice calm and articulate, outlining ambitious goals and innovative strategies. Sarah listened, nodding, offering professional insights where appropriate. On the surface, it was a typical business meeting. But beneath the veneer of corporate discourse, a silent, desperate battle raged within Sarah. Every time he made eye contact, every time he gestured, every time his voice resonated in the quiet office, she fought to keep her emotions locked away. She felt a burning desire to reach out, to ask him about his life, his childhood, his adoptive parents, to tell him the truth. But the fear, The crushing, paralyzing fear of the fallout held her captive. She found herself analyzing his every facial expression, searching for clues, for similarities to herself or to the faint memories of her own parents. It was a macabre game of genetic deduction, played out in the confines of a professional meeting. She noticed a faint scar above his left eyebrow, a small, almost imperceptible line. Had he had it as a child? Was it from a fall, a playground mishap? These mundane questions, usually reserved for a mother's tender recollection, were agonizingly out of reach. As the meeting progressed, Elias, perhaps sensing her unusual quietness, or mistaking it for intense concentration, paused. "Is everything all right, Sarah? You seem a little preoccupied." Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. Had she been too obvious? Had her mask slipped? "No, no, Mr. Thorne," she quickly responded, forcing a confident tone. "Just a lot to take in. Your vision for Phoenix is ambitious and exciting." She hoped her voice didn't betray the tremor she felt deep inside. He seemed to accept her explanation, nodding. "Good. Ambition is what drives progress. We'll be working closely on this, Sarah. Very closely. I'll need your full commitment." "You'll have it," she managed, the words feeling like a betrayal to her own fragile peace. The meeting concluded, and Sarah retreated to her desk, utterly drained. The phrase "working closely" echoed in her mind, a terrifying prophecy. How much longer could she maintain this elaborate charade? The emotional toll was immense. She found herself sleeping poorly, plagued by vivid dreams of a newborn's cry and the haunting image of Elias Thorne's face. She started making small, uncharacteristic mistakes at work, minor errors in reports or missed deadlines, something that had never happened in her meticulously ordered professional life. Her colleagues, noticing her unusual distraction, began to express subtle concern. One afternoon, during a casual conversation by the coffee machine, her close colleague and friend, David Miller, a kind-hearted man with a penchant for bad jokes, approached her. "Hey, Sarah, you seem a bit off lately. Everything all right? You're usually the calmest person in the office, and now you look like you're carrying the weight of the world." Sarah forced a laugh, a dry, hollow sound. "Just adjusting to the new regime, David. Elias Thorne is intense." David nodded sagely. "He certainly is. A real shark, but a brilliant one. Still, you seem more rattled than usual. Did he give you a hard time?" "No, nothing like that," Sarah lied, quickly changing the subject. "Just a lot on my plate, you know. The Phoenix project is ramping up." David, perceptive as always, didn't push, but his concerned gaze lingered on her. She knew she was acting strangely, but she couldn't risk revealing even a sliver of the truth. The secret was a living entity, an invisible burden she carried everywhere, crushing her with its weight. The pressure mounted not just at work, but at home. Mark, her husband, noticed her withdrawn behavior, her lack of appetite, her restless nights. He was her rock, her confidant, but even to him, she couldn't utter the truth. How could she? How could she explain that the decision they had both come to terms with, the one they had believed was buried forever, had now materialized in such a shocking, undeniable form? It would be a betrayal of their shared journey, a reopening of old wounds he thought were healed. And what about Lily, their adopted daughter? How would this revelation impact her? The thought of shattering her family's peace, of exposing them to the seismic shock of her past, was too terrifying to contemplate. One evening, Mark found her staring blankly at the television, not really watching, her eyes distant and haunted. He sat beside her, gently taking her hand. "Sarah, talk to me. Something's wrong. It's more than just a new boss, isn't it? You look like you've seen a ghost." A ghost. If only it were that simple. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to scream, to confess everything, to unload the unimaginable burden she carried. But the words wouldn't come. The fear of destroying everything, of witnessing the shock and pain in Mark's eyes, kept her silent. She forced a weak smile. "Just stress, honey. New responsibilities. I'll be fine." Mark sighed, his brow furrowed with concern. All right, but you know I'm here for you, always. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. His unconditional love was a painful reminder of the wall she had built around herself, a barrier that even he could not penetrate. Meanwhile, Elias Thorne, completely unaware of the turmoil he caused, continued to make his mark on Ethel Solutions. He was demanding but fair, driven but articulate. He commanded respect, not through intimidation, but through sheer competence and a captivating presence. Sarah saw colleagues, initially wary, slowly begin to warm to him, impressed by his vision and leadership. He was clearly destined for even greater heights, and the thought that she would have to witness his meteoric rise, to be a part of it, while carrying this crushing secret, was almost unbearable. The secret was a living, breathing entity, constantly whispering in her ear, reminding her of its presence. It manifested in subtle ways. A sudden catch in her breath when Elias walked past, a fleeting moment of intense maternal protectiveness when she saw him looking tired or stressed, a poignant ache when she imagined the life he had led without her, the milestones she had missed. She found herself trying to learn more about him without raising suspicion, subtle searches of the company intranet for his bio, listening intently to office gossip, trying to piece together the narrative of his life from afar. She learned he was unmarried, no children, entirely devoted to his career. A profound sadness washed over her. He had grown into an impressive man, a testament to the love and care of his adoptive parents. She had made the right decision, she told herself, trying to quell the rising tide of regret. But the conviction felt hollow, easily shattered by the reality of his presence. The grip of the secret tightened with each passing day. It was not merely a hidden fact. It was a force that was slowly, inexorably, reshaping her reality, pushing her to the brink. Sarah knew that this fragile equilibrium couldn't last. The dam she had built to hold back the past was cracking, and the pressure was immense. The question of exposure was no longer a distant possibility, but an imminent threat. The only unknown was how, and when, the truth would finally burst forth, sweeping away everything in its path. And when it did, Sarah knew her life and perhaps Elias's would never be the same. The stage was set for an inevitable, agonizing confrontation. A collision of worlds that had been destined to meet, despite 32 years of separation and the desperate efforts to keep them apart. The tension in Sarah's life reached a fever pitch. Weeks had turned into months, each day a grueling test of her resolve. The strain was evident in the faint lines etched around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands, and the constant, almost imperceptible clench of her jaw. She was a woman teetering on the edge, haunted by a past that refused to be silenced and tormented by a present that demanded a performance she could no longer sustain. Elias Thorne, still oblivious to the emotional tempest raging within her, continued to be her boss, her colleague, and unknowingly, the central figure in her personal drama. Their professional interactions had grown more frequent and intense. Elias relied heavily on Sarah's expertise for the Phoenix project, drawing her into late-night calls and demanding brainstorming sessions. These close-quarter collaborations only amplified Sarah's internal agony. She was a master of her craft, her insights invaluable, yet every triumph felt tainted by the secret. There were moments, fleeting but potent, when she would look at him, truly look at the man he had become, and an overwhelming wave of maternal pride would wash over her, quickly followed by a crushing guilt. She knew so little about him, yet she recognized the echoes of herself, and of the man she had loved briefly, in his ambitious spirit and sharp intellect. Then came the corporate retreat, a mandatory, 3-day event held at a picturesque but secluded resort nestled in the mountains, designed for team building and strategic planning. For Sarah, it felt like a trap. There would be no escape, no easy excuses to avoid social interactions. She would be in constant proximity to Elias, forced to engage in casual conversation, to let her guard down, however slightly. On the second evening, after a particularly draining day of workshops, the company hosted a dinner and social event. The atmosphere was relaxed, with soft music playing and colleagues mingling. Sarah found herself cornered by a group discussing family lives, a topic she usually navigated with practiced ease. But tonight, The conversation felt like a personal attack. She excused herself, seeking refuge on the dimly lit patio, hoping for a moment of peace. She stood by the railing, gazing out at the star-studded sky, the crisp mountain air a welcome balm against the suffocating tension she felt. She took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She hadn't realized she wasn't alone until a voice broke the silence, deep and familiar. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" Sarah tensed, knowing instantly it was Elias. She turned slowly, forcing a polite smile. "It is, Mr. Thorne. A welcome break from the city lights." He walked closer, leaning against the railing beside her, his silhouette framed by the night sky. "Please, Sarah. It's just Elias, especially outside of office hours." She nodded, a knot forming in her stomach. Elias. Saying his name felt both natural and utterly terrifying. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the crickets chirping, the distant murmur of conversation from inside the lodge. Then Elias spoke again, his voice softer, more reflective than she had ever heard it. "You know, this place reminds me of somewhere I used to visit as a child. My adoptive parents had a small cabin not too far from here. We used to come up every summer." Sarah's breath hitched. This was it. A direct reference to his past, a door opening just a crack. Every fiber of her being urged her to push it wider, to ask, to finally know. But the fear held her back, gripping her heart like an icy vice. "Oh," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "That sounds lovely." He chuckled softly. "It was. They were wonderful people. Gave me everything." He paused, a wistful note in his voice. "Sometimes I wonder about my birth parents, though. Just a fleeting thought, you know? Curiosity. What kind of people were they? Why did they make the choice they did?" The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pain, with questions she alone could answer. Sarah felt a surge of emotion so potent, so overwhelming, that she thought she might collapse. Regret, sorrow, a fierce, protective love she had never truly been allowed to express. Her eyes welled up, blurring the stars above. This was her chance. Her one terrifying chance. "Elias," she began, her voice trembling, barely audible. She turned to face him fully, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." He looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, perhaps sensing the profound shift in her demeanor. "Sarah, are you all right?" Tears streamed down her face now, hot and unstoppable. The dam had finally burst. "No," she choked out, shaking her head. "No, I'm not all right. Elias, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered, fueled by years of unspoken grief and guilt. "I'm your birth mother." The words hung in the air, shattering the peaceful night. Elias's eyes, those familiar hazel eyes, widened in disbelief. His face, usually so composed, contorted with a mixture of shock, confusion, and a dawning, terrible realization. He took a step back, as if physically recoiling from the blow. "What?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, disbelieving. "What are you talking about?" Sarah didn't flinch. The truth, once unleashed, demanded to be heard. 32 years ago, in a hospital in Atlanta. I was just 20, young, scared, alone. I didn't know what to do. I made a choice I believed was for your benefit, for your future. I gave you up for adoption, a closed adoption. She recounted the bare facts, the desperation, the pain, the profound sacrifice, her voice cracking with emotion. "I never knew who took you, never knew where you went, until you walked into my office. Those eyes, Elias, I knew them instantly. I've seen them in my dreams for over 3 decades." Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. Elias stared at her, his expression unreadable, a storm brewing behind his eyes. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of profound disorientation. My birth mother? You? My boss." The irony was not lost on him. It was a cruel, unimaginable twist of fate, playing out in the most public, professional setting imaginable. "I know it's a shock," Sarah pleaded, her voice thick with tears. "I know you must hate me. I wouldn't blame you." He didn't speak for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something beyond her, beyond the resort, perhaps trying to reconcile this impossible revelation with the reality of his own life. The man who had built a successful career, who had believed he understood his own origins, was now facing a truth that rewrote his entire history. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, tinged with a raw vulnerability Sarah had never heard before. "Hate you? How could I hate you? I don't know what to feel. This is unbelievable. My whole life, everything I thought I knew." He trailed off, overwhelmed. "Why now? Why did you tell me now? Why didn't you just keep it a secret?" "Because I couldn't," Sarah sobbed, tears streaming freely down her face. "Every day, seeing you, working with you, it was tearing me apart. I couldn't live with the lie anymore. You deserved to know the truth. And I deserved to finally tell you." He looked at her again, really looked at her, and perhaps, for the first time, saw past the employee, past the professional facade, to the broken, anguished woman before him. The initial shock slowly began to give way to something else, something softer, a glimmer of understanding. He saw her pain, her regret, the decades of silent suffering etched on her face. "My adoptive parents," he said, his voice still shaky. "They told me I was adopted. They were always open about it. They said my birth mother loved me very much, but couldn't keep me. They said she made a selfless choice." Sarah's heart ached with a bittersweet pain. "They were right, Elias. It was the hardest choice I ever made. But I believed it was the only way for you to have a better life, a stable family." He took another deep breath, running a hand over his face. The initial shock was starting to subside, replaced by a profound sense of gravity. "This changes everything." "I know," Sarah whispered, "and I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know." He looked at her, his hazel eyes, so like her own, now filled with a complexity of emotions, shock, confusion, a burgeoning curiosity, and perhaps, just perhaps, a nascent understanding. He was processing it, not with anger, but with a quiet, stunned contemplation. The professional boundaries, the boss-employee dynamic, had completely dissolved, replaced by something far more fundamental, far more primal. "We need to talk," he finally said, his voice firm, but no longer laced with disbelief. "Properly, when we're back in the city. There's so much to absorb." Sarah nodded, a fragile hope blooming in her chest amidst the devastation. "Whenever you're ready." He turned and walked away, not with the confident stride of a powerful executive, but with the measured, deliberate steps of a man whose world had just been irrevocably altered. Sarah watched him go, a profound exhaustion settling over her. The truth was out. The secret, after 32 agonizing years, was finally revealed. The bond, forged in the pain of birth and separation, but now undeniably revealed by fate, stood before them, raw and exposed. The revelation was not the end, but a beginning of an arduous, uncertain journey towards understanding, healing, and perhaps a new form of connection. The corporate office, once a stage for her silent torment, would now become the backdrop for an unfolding human drama, a testament to the enduring power of blood ties and the relentless way destiny weaves its intricate tapestry. The baby they gave up for adoption had indeed come back as her boss, and the true story, the one where they both had to navigate this impossible truth, had just begun. The story of Sarah and Elias is a stark reminder that life often throws us curveballs, and sometimes those curveballs come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. It's a testament to the enduring power of family, even when separated by decades and circumstance, and the undeniable pull of a past that refuses to stay buried. If this story has resonated with you, if it's left you pondering the hidden connections that might exist in your own life, or if you simply can't get enough of these gripping tales, then make sure you smash that like button right now. Seriously, hit it hard. And if you want to be the first to know when we uncover more incredible, real-life dramas just like this one, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on those notification bells. Every like, every subscriber, every notification helps us bring more of these powerful, unbelievable stories directly to you. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next compelling chapter of human destiny.